Here to discuss, political analyst, author of the Great American Political Trivia Challenge, Rich Rubino, friend of the show. Rich, always good to have you. So,
thank you.
On the left, a lot of anger regarding especially the vice president's framing of Good's actions as quote-unquote domestic terrorism. You also have Illinois Democratic Representative Robin Kelly saying she's planning to try and impeach Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he's also not ruling these moves out. If the House flips in November, how do you see this playing out?
I think there's a possibility of it. And historically, there's only been 2 impeachments of cabinet officers in the entire history of the Republic, and neither of them landed up being convicted by the Senate. So theoretically, if the House does flip and the Democrats have just about universal support in voting for the impeachment, it would then go to the United States Senate, which potentially would have the vote could vote potentially to convict him. And you need 2/3 to convict somebody, which I think would be a very tall task. You would need a lot of Republicans to come over and support that as well. So I think from a practical standpoint, the chances are very slim of her actually being impeached and then convicted.
Understood. And if they don't win the House, is there any real merit to these threats?
I don't think so. I don't think this is really going to go anywhere. I think that if you go back, Gerald Ford, when he was trying to impeach William Douglas, Supreme Court Justice, when he was in the House of Representatives, said basically that impeachment is a political process and it's whatever the House of Representatives, a majority, says that it is. So there really is nothing in the Constitution that specifically says, other than the kind of opaque high crimes and misdemeanors and other crimes and misdemeanors, but it's very much a political process, if you will. And I don't think that you're actually going to see her being convicted, barring extraneous circumstances.
All right. Excellent to note. Wanted to widen the scope here. We had a political contributor on the network who weighed in earlier today, Mick Mulvaney. Here was a bit on his take regarding this shooting in Minnesota.
There's a rule of thumb, Laura, in politics that when you are explaining, you are losing. And I think right now the administration is explaining. I think at the end of the day, based upon what I've seen, there's going to be a very strong legal case justifying this shooting. That's a legal case. People don't care about the legalities of it. They care about what they feel and see themselves. And this just looks wrong.
So how much, Rich, will feelings versus the legal reality when we talk, play in when we talk about public sentiment? Would it be wiser for the administration perhaps to stay tight-lipped, let this investigation play out?
Yes, theoretically. But, this country is so divided ideologically, theologically, philosophically, just about any other way you can possibly imagine. This is really a visceral issue. It's not an intellectual issue where people are looking at this kind of both sides of the issue. I think most people are taking their pre-formulated biases and they're using it, and they're kind of using it through a prism, and there really is no way that you can potentially persuade somebody. So it's a visceral issue. It's an emotional issue. It's not an intellectual issue, but I think that it's absolutely correct what Mr. Mulvaney just said there, that this is something that when the president is spending a lot of time trying to explain this, J.D. Vance is trying to explain this, talking about potentially how the immigration issue should be decided at the ballot box, but when they're explaining this, they really are losing, and that is really probably one of the first 3 rules of politics.
As we await the facts, the details of this investigation, what do you see as the timeline here, Rich? What are you anticipating? How much information will we get, and when?
It's a great question, and we really don't know. Again, everybody is kind of, going back into their kind of partisan corners, if you will. I don't know what the actual from a legal process, what's going to happen, but you're really not going to change a lot of people's minds. And when you have a scenario like this, it's very perilous, certainly for the political process. It's very perilous for the nation as a whole.
Because you're a historian, I wanted to ask you about the political risk in weighing in this early, because as you noted, we do have people on both sides of the aisle with very strong accusations at this point, and all the information hasn't been disseminated as of yet. So what do you see as that political risk at this hour of developments?
I think that right now both sides are really talking to their base. I think that from a Republican standpoint, obviously the president and J.D. Vance are talking to their base. One of the main tenets of their base is about law and order, so that's why they are very much in defense of the ICE agent here. Contrary-wise, on the Democratic side, I think that the Democrats are taking the state that this is essentially overkill, potentially brutality, potentially homicide, and some would even say murder. There really isn't much of a center ground here. It's really both sides really digging in their ideological heels, if you will. And I don't really see that there would be necessarily some sort of a resolution. I will say that the potential of an impeachment of Mrs. Nome, while I think the chances of impeachment and conviction are astronomically low. This is going to be very much a political fight. It's going to be very much a political. It's going to be very much a political Donnybrook, if you will. And at the end of the day, she probably will not be impeached. She will not be convicted. But we'll see what happens in terms of the political process here.
Oh, right, and you would imagine all of this will be gaining steam as these midterms, as we draw closer to those elections. Rich Rubino.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.